Today on Something More with Chris Boyd, I'm joined by a special guest. We've got Pete Hoagland. He's of the Warren team with Wealth Enhancement, and we're going to be talking about the issues physicians face in their financial planning. Join us.
Welcome to Something More with Chris Boyd. Chris Boyd is a certified financial planner practitioner and senior vice president financial advisor at Wealth Enhancement Group, one of the nation's largest registered investment advisors. We call it Something More because we'd like to talk not only about those important dollar and cents issues, but also the quality of life issues that make the money matters matter. Here he is, your fulfillment facilitator, your partner in prosperity, advising clients on Cape Cod and across the country. Here's your host, J. Christopher Boyd.
All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for being with us for another episode of Something More. I'm here with Jeff Perry and Russ Ball, both of the AMR team, and our special guest is Pete Hoagland. He is of the Warren team. We are all with Wealth Enhancement, and glad to have you joining us. Pete, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
This is going to be fun. So, Pete, we're trying to encourage Pete to do his own podcast so he can get to be a specialist you hear about all the time. But in the meantime, if you're a physician and thinking about the needs you might have with financial planning, portfolio management, you're going to learn a lot from this podcast. Let's start, Pete, by getting to know you a little bit and tell us a little bit about your journey. How'd you become a financial professional? And did you go to school thinking, oh, I'm going to be a financial advisor, or did you sort of happen across this some other way?
Yeah, absolutely. No, the truth of the matter is I did not go to school for financial planning. In fact, I went to school for political science about a little more than 2 decades ago. And, I liked that. It was a lot of fun. And it turns out that nobody actually pays you to do that job, at least not legally, which means that I also at that time met my future wife and said, I should probably find a job so that my in-laws, my future in-laws don't,
yeah.
kick
So
me out the
you'll
door,
say
right?
yes when you ask. Yeah.
And so I had a minor in economics, but what I found was, talking about politics has a lot of dovetails to this part of the job too, right? There's constantly looking at what the tea leaves are at the Washington or the various agencies out there, and how those affect my clients. And that's been a really powerful piece of the tools that I use to talk to clients.
Boy,
and
it seems
I'll give
like
you
that's
one more thing.
even more increasingly a part of our conversations really in the last 10, 15 years. We used to not think as much about the political dynamics in our portfolio decisions that today you just have to be tuned into it. And people with a more constant news channel watching tie it in, right? They think about what's the impact of this. Anyway, I interrupted you. You're going to add something more.
No, I'll say, the rise of social media, the Twitter, especially, that we see the infights to a much greater degree than we ever did before. I don't want to go back to the time of the smoke-filled back rooms where all the decisions were made, but there was some element of just waiting until things were done before you jump to what the decision should be. Now we're swinging back and forth on every tweet or whatever they're called now, and it seems like that's really caused a lot of consternation that probably goes for nothing.
That's a great point. I think you were about to add something about your background as well, and I got you sidetracked here.
I was. I graduated from a Baptist Christian college, Eastern University, outside of Philadelphia. And, I went to school for political science, and now I'm in finances too. And, people always say, well, what are the things that people don't want to talk about? It's religion, and it's politics, and it's money. And I'm here to tell you that's false. That is the only thing that people want to talk about, right? If you narrow those things down, everyone wants to give you their opinion on what each of those subjects.
That's funny. Yeah, you're into all the taboo. Well, let's see if we can pick your brain and learn a little bit about how'd you get connected to working with physicians as part of the core of your clientele and the people you serve?
It was a little bit by accident, truth be told. I've been in the registered investment advisor field for about 16 years and previously a broker for a handful before that. But what I found was that I just started to accumulate some clients and their professionals that they're connected to, things like malpractice and insurance or attorneys that are working in that field, and found that I was really talking to them about things that a lot of the physicians wanted to know about. So it was pretty natural. I do have two parents that both have they're both doctors, but neither of them are medical doctors. They both have their PhDs, so that doesn't help me.
Yeah.
But it's really just kind of come organically, and because I've been very interested about it.
That's neat. One of the things that comes to my mind when I think about trying to connect with physicians is how pressed they are for time. And it seems very challenging to get their attention to focus on something outside of something like their practice. They're clinicians. They're working on all their patient issues. So how have you managed to navigate that to say, hey, this is really important for your future? How do you catch them and not be perceived as some sales guy trying to push them into something, but really a professional giving them counsel?
Yeah, it's hard. Just getting enough time with them on any, one long period of time to really dig into the subject matter is challenging. Physicians used to live off of beepers, right? Well, those are gone, but they're replaced with text messages on cell phones, right? And so you might only get communication with them because of their nature of how they work in very short little bursts. And that can be really tough to not just have to cut to right to the through line of why this is important to them. Yeah. The other thing is that emotionally, a lot of them are pouring all of their emotions into their work, right? I mean, that's what comes partially with being a physician, especially one that's working with the same patients over and over, that, they're called to do that type of job. And that takes away a lot of their ability to, to really think through the emotional part of our job, which is really key, caring for your own family, thinking about your own financial future. And both those things really are pretty significant roadblocks to get people to focus in that regard.
I would think one of the things that would be really important in working with physicians, particularly because they're so conscious of litigation and the challenges of that seem to face physicians more than probably some other professions. That part of the way you'd have engagement would be to offer their practice a retirement plan, and because of some of the liability protections afforded to a retirement plan. Would you talk a little bit about, is that true? Is that part of how you connect and engage? And is that still an important characteristic of what drives some of the thinking and the heavy emphasis on retirement savings vehicles as a driver for physicians?
Yeah, it's really two parts. So, the risk part first. I think a lot of them are very fatalistic about this idea of risk as it relates to their professional work, right? If I've had the opportunity to work with some malpractice captives over the years, and hearing about the stories of what potential litigation is coming for larger groups because of healthcare decisions that are made, it can be pretty eye-opening that industry really takes as a matter of course that occasionally things are going to go wrong, and so that's why you have the protection from there too. So there's a fatalism that comes with the professional part of it, but it does also open up this idea of they're looking at risks in other parts, right? So you'll find a lot of physicians that I've experienced that have really strong fears about their own lawsuit risk at a personal level. Everything from getting in a car accident where they might get sued for something that you and I might just experience as a fender bender, to potentially shifting assets in their name outside to a family member, a spouse, or into a trust, right? They're really conscious of that part of that because they kind of know that professionally they're always a liability. Even the really great ones still have things that could potentially cause negative outcomes for patients, and right. And so they've kind of thought through that part, and they're really heavily thinking about the other aspect too. However, you really raise a great point about the retirement part, because that's one that is very often overlooked. I think about physicians a little bit like a professional athlete.
Mm-hmm.
And they might take this the right way or the wrong way. But the way that I look at that is they start later in their careers than other professions in terms of making money, right? We know that they have this big residency hurdle that needs to go through. They also have usually pretty hefty medical school debt that is a big lodestone on any savings that can be done. And so it takes a while, even if they're making really good income, to get to a point where they can start doing the kind of savings that a financial planner might be prescribing from day one, right? But then on the other side of that, it's a difficult, physically demanding job for most that can't be done as long as other major professions that might be high income.
Mm-hmm.
So you have these truncated earning years, even if they're really high. And so like a professional athlete, you really have to make the most of it while you have it, because you don't know when the end is going to be, in the same way that you would with someone maybe that has a normal white collar job.
You started telling us before we got on with the show about certain phases of the physician experience. Bring us back to that. Tell our audience more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really three major, I would call it, phases in their life. The early years, post-residency into current position. A lot of physicians are still coming out of residency with a contract. Unlike people that are leaving college to even a good job, most people are at-will employees, right? And so they're just, as long as they're working, they're getting paid, right? Physicians, especially ones that are in specialty fields that are making really good mid six-figure or high six-figure numbers right away, are often signing contracts that are multiple-year contracts, right? That gives a peace of mind for them that other high-paid, white-collar industries don't have. But that also lays, I would say, some unfounded confidence that that's going to be good forever, right? And so that first hurdle to get over is this idea that things are always going to be good. I'll have income coming in to cover any bills that I might have for as long as I want to work. And so people's spending rises to the level of income, right? Because of that. There's no rainy day savings feelings like the way that we might have had if your income gradually increases over the course of your first 10 to 15 working years. So that's a big mindset hurdle to get over too, right?
Mm.
The mid-career, though, is where now you've started to pay down some of your major student loan medical school debt. Now you actually have excess cash flow. This is really that second hurdle, where if they don't make good decisions now, you're missing out on a lot of those opportunities. This is that truncated earning years, right? You're getting to this idea that if you're not maximizing by deferring or savings into either a retirement plan set up by your work, or even more powerfully, just getting investment cash out of the checking and savings account, that it's really big risk, right?
And not spending frivolously, too big a house, too big a car type stuff, right?
Absolutely.
Toys, yeah.
And then the end career, especially for those that are business owners, practice owners, for them, I think what's always pretty eye-opening is, even for practices that are paying them through their good, consistent patient flow, a really nice income stream, what I think people don't necessarily understand is the practice itself is not worth as much as it might be if it was a business that produces a good, right? This is a service-based business as it comes down. It also is reliant on patients that are coming for that physician or treatment service, right? And so unlike, a business that can be replicable or taken by another larger entity and merged in, if that physician or the team that's servicing those clients or patients is gone, well, that loses a lot of value, because there's a high likelihood that those patients find another competing
someone
avenue to
else.
get the business.
That's really
Right?
interesting. I would have thought it'd be more of a recurring revenue kind of mindset because of the nature of, people coming back and having a routine and some of that. I mean, maybe not every specialist has that, but you know what I mean?
Yeah,
But it seems like that's the reality. It just is not get that kind of valuation kind of consideration.
no, and unlike accounting firms or registered investment advisors or another firm where clients have pretty low transition among advisors, right? They mostly stay. There's a high retention rate. Physician practices are more nuanced. You might find that it's a proximity. If there's no one else there, patients will continue to go there. But there's a lot of loyalty that's built up, especially for the recurring revenue ones like neurology or the ones that really your patient is kind of seeing you really consistently from a long-term standpoint. They're coming primarily to see the staff, the physician. They'll go long distances for that, right? And you could find that without that physician, that the practice itself doesn't, it can wither pretty quickly.
When it comes to these phases, I imagine you also help people as they've exited their practice and started their retirement phase. There's a whole new set of thoughts that go into that, income years that they're drawing from their portfolio. Is that another aspect of what you help people with?
Yeah, absolutely. It all comes down to that same mindset is, in some ways an artificial scarcity mindset. And, there's a lot of our industry that kicks around this concept, right, of scarcity.
Yeah.
And trying to generate that artificially could be really powerful to allow for you to kind of make these decisions that make sure that you're preparing for the future rather than just the present.
Yeah.
But it's also one that can make your current timeline feel worse because of that, right? You're making yourself feel like you have less than in order to kind of care for your future self, which you can then make you feel you have abundance, right? That could be a really tightrope to walk as an advisor, to try to convince people to make those decisions to essentially not access some of their funds, feel comfortable that they have it, but at the same time, don't feel too comfortable so that you'll go and spend it. And that can be challenging.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So, Pete, at what point in that continuum that you're talking about do most physicians start seeking out advice and seeking out help from people like you and us?
Yeah, probably way too late for them in general if they're actively seeking out somebody. The first financial person that they are going to run into in their lives is going to be an insurance-based person. Doctors know intrinsically that we need liability or insurance coverage, right? We have high income immediately. That's going to immediately lend itself to something like disability insurance, maybe a life insurance policy to cover lost years if there's a sudden passing, and then of course malpractice insurance if they're not getting it from a larger entity. That's their first access, and although I have deep respect for people in the insurance industry, it's not always the best experience and can lead you into a place where by the time they're reaching out to someone who's doing long-term financial planning, we have to unwind a lot of the decisions that they made previously, both from a financial standpoint and actually really from a behavioral standpoint, right? Because those products that have bells and whistles can look really attractive to people until you actually have to use them. And then maybe you find that, they weren't all what they were cracked up to be.
New doctors are being inundated with calls and messaging, and from that sector of the financial economy, we have a niece who's a new doctor, and it's just overwhelming, and they're in really no position unless they have, some previous education or experience or good guidance, maybe from a family member. I can see how easy it is to get captured by that, especially with their limited time, et cetera. So for new doctors, what are some of the behavioral mistakes? You kind of briefly discussed, but some of the behavioral issues that new doctors make other than buying maybe the wrong products.
Yeah, I would say pre-spending money that they don't have. You mentioned about inundated with financials. Another great thing out there is making up for lost time through basically overspending. A lot of really high-end physicians coming out of school might have been the valedictorian of their high school class, or they're, maybe very high up in their college, their undergrad graduating class, right? And yet, by the time you get through med school and actually start making money, you might be 27, 28, 29,
Yep.
and getting offers to come to your 10-year high school reunion, and the most income that you've made through residency is $50,000, right? It's a hard pill to swallow, to know that the next year might be 500.
Yep.
If you're in a specialty area, the first year contract. And so you start spending that to make up for lost time before you really have all the dollars in your pocket. The mortgage industry is one that really kind of preys on this too, because of that contracted nature for specialty physicians, they're willing to offer mortgages for people with nothing down, no previous years of working experience income needed, because you have a contract, right?
Yep.
And because of that consistency. And so there's mortgage offers out there that say, we'll give you 100% or 98% lend to buy that home, and it's just a mortgage payment. So you have the cash flow to cover it. Just do this now. So there's a lot of potential, risks that come with that, because there's not a gradual build of the income, right? It looks more like somebody receiving an inheritance all at once, where they haven't had the experience of feeling that tangible growth over time.
Yeah, behaviorally, you're right on. I think a lot of them, this is stereotypical, but have this mindset, and it's not wrong, but they paid a great sacrifice to get where they're going, and they, you deserve this, right? After all this, you deserve to live and act like a doctor.
That's exactly right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Pete, I would think that it becomes really important for physicians to find a good advisor, a good counselor, in your case, a fiduciary, that can help them navigate a comprehensive approach to all that they need to think about when it comes to estate planning. Tax planning, I'm sure, is a huge driver for physicians. I'm sure every insurance professional in the world would love to get in front of, the physicians for their disability or life insurance needs. So how do you navigate that in trying to help them build the right team of people around them? You as the financial planner, portfolio manager, you mentioned your RIA. So how do you bring to them some of these other considerations that are really important for them to be including in their planning?
Yeah, I've done a couple of different outreach type programs to see if I can speak to them early as possible, right? Because like I said, if we're getting a referral from somebody, it's usually a physician that's already in their mid-career trying to figure out what to do. And, that might be one where we're unwinding problems. And in the reach outs that we've done, we've really gone about it in a couple of different ways. One, that we have worked with physician recruiting firms. There's some physicians out there that prefer what's called a locum tenens like role, where they're a bit of a mercenary like physician going to primarily a hospital system that's really missing out on talent, but not as a full-time W-2 employee, but a contract like work. And I think that's pretty attractive for some physicians that maybe don't have families already and are willing to receive a bit more income for the nomadic kind of lifestyle of
try somewhere new kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That becomes really impactful because we can talk to them early, and without that W-2 or business connection, they're missing the the retirement plan savings options. They're missing the the coverages that we talked about that come through full-time employment. So we've been somewhat successful with talking to them about how we can start early, and those people are more engaged with it because they get that tangible asset, things that they're missing, that they know they're missing through a W-2 employee.
Yeah.
We've also done over the years various connections with CME presentations, certified medical education stuff. Usually our specific topics are not considered CME accredited, which is normal because it's not physician clinical work.
Right.
But we do talk to them in terms of business planning, right? Business planning for their own work too, and thinking about their own personal as somewhat business related too, right? So we've been somewhat successful with talking to younger, right out of college, even last year residency type, physicians, to see if they're where their heads are at, to see if they're more engaged with where we're going next, and that's been pretty good to at least get some of the people before they get offered, to Jeff's point, the mortgages, the insurance policies, all the bells and whistles that come with more income.
So, how do you communicate? Let's kind of, as we wind down, are there newsletters? Are there things that people who might be thinking, I should learn a little more about Pete and his team? How would they learn more about your practice area?
Well, it sounds like I should be doing a podcast about it, right? That would be helpful.
Absolutely.
I think you should.
Where they're at, right? So like I said, it's hard to kind of get their attention. So we go right to the source in terms of talking to teaching hospitals for the younger physicians. They also have larger organizations that are state level ones, like the MGMA, which is a more national one. There's a hospitalist one as well too. That's good to kind of speak to physicians. And what they find is that as they're coming to these events for their other parts of their clinical work too, it often sparks the idea that they need to plan for themselves as well too. So we try to be to some degree of presence in those otherwise physician focused events, so they can kind of see what else is available, because like you said, there's a lot of less than stellar financial pieces out there that they can get tripped up on.
Yeah. I mean, we've all seen it with the high commissions and who knows what. So, or people who may not have the years of experience and expertise that really know the nuance that you're dealing with day to day.
Right.
So with that, Pete, thanks so much for being part of our show. And we'll look forward to having you back to promote your new podcast once it's off the ground, huh?
Thanks a lot, guys. This is really great.
Thanks for being here. And thank you for being with us. If you need help with any of these issues or other financial planning issues, reach out to all of us here at Wealth Enhancement. Thanks for being with us. Until next time, keep striving for something more.
Thank you for listening to Something More with Chris Boyd. Call us for help, whether it's for financial planning or portfolio management, insurance concerns, or those quality of life issues that make the money matters matter. Whatever's on your mind, visit us at somethingmorewithchrisboyd.com or call us toll-free at 866-771-8901. Or send us your questions to amr-info@wealthenhancement.com. You're listening to Something More with Chris Boyd Financial Talk Show. Wealth Enhancement Advisory Services and J. Christopher Boyd provide investment advice on an individual basis to clients only. Proper advice depends on a complete analysis of all facts and circumstances. The information given on this program is general financial comments and cannot be relied upon as pertaining to your specific situation. Wealth Enhancement Group cannot guarantee that using the information from this show will generate profits or ensure freedom from loss. Listeners should consult their own financial advisors or conduct their own due diligence before making any financial decisions.